Marty Lagina pointed to a spot on the map and said what he believed was there. That is the sentence this video is built around. This is The Curse of Oak Island, and the episode is Oak Island Changes Forever. Marty Lagina pinpoints the most significant location in the investigation's history. What Marty said, and the data that produced the confidence to say it, is what this video will walk through from beginning to end. But before we get to the moment itself, we need to understand something important. We need to understand who Marty Lagina is, what the investigation has been building toward, and why a quiet statement from this particular man about this particular location carries a weight that nothing said on this island before it quite has. Marty Lagina has been the investigation's rational anchor for 13 seasons. That is not a casual description. It is a documented record of how he has behaved on this island, in front of cameras, across a very long time. He is an engineer by training and a businessman by profession. He does not speak in speculation. He does not lean into excitement before the data supports it. When the investigation has produced results that other members of the team responded to with enthusiasm, Marty's response has consistently been the same. Show me the numbers. Explain the methodology. Tell me what alternative explanation you have ruled out. He has been the voice that keeps this investigation credible, that prevents the gap between finding and conclusion from being crossed too early. His brother Rick is different. Rick has believed in this island since he read about it as a boy, and that belief has never required external validation. 13 seasons of watching the two of them work together has shown the viewer a consistent pattern. Rick leans toward the significance of what is found. Marty holds back until the evidence justifies the lean. In this episode, those two dispositions arrive at the same place, and the reason that matters is exactly what the rest of this video is going to explain. Before the location, before the season, before the data, there is the island. And the island requires a moment of honest description, because what it contains underground is what gives Marty's identification its full significance. Oak Island's underground system was not a natural formation. It was built. The evidence for that is not theoretical. It is physical, accumulated across more than 2 centuries of investigation. Deliberate construction at significant depth. Platforms of wood, arranged at regular intervals going down into the earth. First discovered in 1795, and confirmed again in multiple excavations since. A flood tunnel system, a network of underground channels connecting specific parts of the island to the surrounding ocean, engineered specifically to fill the primary dig zone with seawater whenever an excavation reaches a certain depth. That is not geology. That is architecture. An underground defensive system built to defeat exactly the kind of work the investigation has been doing. And at the center of that system, protected by the flood tunnels, accessible only to whoever built and understood the full design, is whatever the system was built to protect. What that is has never been confirmed. But the physical evidence of the system itself, accumulated across 13 seasons of this investigation and more than 2 centuries before it, makes the existence of something worth protecting a reasonable, evidence-based conclusion. The people who came before this team understood that too. The history of Oak Island investigation stretches back to the day Daniel McGinnis found that depression in the ground in 1795. In the years that followed, teams came with the best tools available to them and were stopped, one after another, by the island's flood tunnel system. Excavations that reached promising depths were defeated by water. Tunnels dug to try to bypass the flooding collapsed or flooded themselves. Dynamite was used. Industrial pumps were used. Every advance in excavation technology across more than 2 centuries was eventually brought to bear on this island, and the island's underground engineering consistently proved more sophisticated than whatever was being used against it. What changed, across the years of this television series, was the quality and the specificity of the data. Ground-penetrating radar, sonar mapping, core sampling that could identify soil composition at precise depths. These tools produced a picture of the underground geography that no prior investigation had possessed, an increasingly specific map of what exists below the surface, where it is, and how the components of the underground system relate to each other. Season 13 was the season that map became specific enough for someone to point to a location on it, with a degree of confidence the investigation had never previously achieved. Season 13 produced findings that built toward Marty's conclusion, in a sequence the viewer who has followed the series will recognize. Early in the season, ground-penetrating radar passes over specific areas of the island, returned profiles that the team's analysts described as inconsistent with undisturbed natural ground. The returns had shape, defined edges at depth, geometric consistency, the kind of structural profile that natural geology does not produce. Core samples from within the flagged zones came back, with soil composition results pointing toward placed rather than natural material, ground that had been moved and restructured deliberately, in configurations consistent with constructed underground features. Directional analysis of confirmed underground passages and corridors from earlier seasons produced lines that, when extended across the island's map, converged on a specific zone, not a broad area, a specific zone. The data was not pointing in several directions and leaving the team to choose between them. It was narrowing, season by season and episode by episode, toward a single location. And by the time this episode arrived, Marty had enough data in front of him to say out loud what that location was. The location itself has a history in this investigation that predates this season. It is not a zone that the team came to for the first time in Season 13. It sits in a specific relationship to the island's known underground features, a position relative to the Money Pit Zone, and the swamp that makes a major underground structure in this area, consistent with the design logic of the overall system. Prior investigation work in and near this zone had produced results over multiple seasons: radar anomalies, core sample results, structural indicators at depth, that were specific enough to flag and document, but not specific enough to build a confident conclusion from. The zone had been speaking to the investigation for years. What Season 13 added was the resolution to hear what it was saying clearly, and what it was saying, when the data was assembled and the directional analysis was complete, was that this was the location the underground system was oriented around, not one of several significant locations. The one. The evidence Marty used to reach that conclusion is traceable through the season's documented findings. The radar returns over the zone produced structural profiles at a consistent depth, profiles that matched, in their characteristics, the kind of underground void that a protected chamber or primary storage space would produce. Core samples from within the zone confirmed the radar's picture: material at depth inconsistent with natural deposition, placed with the deliberateness that the rest of the island's underground construction has shown throughout the investigation. The directional analysis of passages confirmed in earlier seasons pointed toward this zone as their apparent destination. Not a passage running through the area, but converging on it, the way passages in a system converge on the thing the system was built to protect. And the relationship between the zone's position and the island's flood tunnel architecture made sense in a way that reinforced the data. The flood tunnels were designed to protect this location specifically, which means their distribution around the island can be read as a map of where the primary protected zone sits. Marty read that map. He read the radar. He read the core samples. And he pointed to a location. The moment itself was not loud. That is the first thing to say about it. Marty did not announce his conclusion dramatically. He presented it the way he presents data, directly, plainly, with the evidence laid out in front of it, and no invitation to treat the conclusion as more or less than what the evidence supports. He pointed to a specific location on the map of the island's underground geography. He described why the data pointed there, and he said that in his assessment, this was the most significant location in the investigation's history. That sentence, from this person, in this context, with this evidence behind it, was the most significant thing said on this island in 13 seasons of this show. Not because it was dramatic, because it was Marty Lagina saying it. And Marty Lagina does not say things like that without the data to back them. Rick heard his brother say it, and responded in the way that 13 seasons of watching Rick Lagina have taught viewers to understand. He was still. Not the stillness of someone who is processing a surprise. The stillness of someone who has believed a thing for a very long time, and has just heard the person whose credibility matters most to the outside world say that the belief is supported. Rick has always known where he thought the investigation was heading. He has not always had the data to make that direction credible to people who require data. Marty's conclusion gave him that. What was visible in Rick in the moment after Marty spoke was not triumph. It was something quieter and more durable. The expression of a man whose belief and whose brother's evidence had just arrived at the same point. The wider team's response to Marty's identification filled in the picture that the brothers' responses established. These are people who have invested professional time and, in several cases, significant portions of their working lives into this investigation. The experts, the geoscientists, the researchers, the consultants who have been brought in across the season to evaluate specific data sets and contribute specific expertise. Their responses, in the moments after Marty's conclusion was on the table, showed the same thing that Rick's response showed. A recognition that something had just changed. Not a discovery, a specific conclusion about location, backed by a specific body of data, stated by the most credible voice on the team. The quietness that fell over the group after Marty spoke was not uncertainty. It was the particular quiet of people understanding the weight of what they had just heard. What Marty's identification means for the underground system is what makes it more than a statement. It is navigational. The island's underground construction is not random. It is a designed system, with components that were built to work together, and a primary protected zone at its center. The location Marty identified, if confirmed through the physical investigation that will follow, would give the team something they have never had before. A specific, data-backed coordinate for where the system's primary zone is, and a specific body of evidence about its physical characteristics. That coordinate changes the investigation's approach. Instead of working toward the center of the system from the edges, which is what every prior investigation has done, and what the flood tunnel system was designed to defeat, the team would be working from a position of knowing specifically where the center is. That is not a small change. It is the difference between searching for something and knowing where to look. What stands between that knowledge and its physical confirmation is real. The underground conditions in the identified zone are challenging. Water management in this area requires specific preparation. The relationship between this part of the island's geology and the flood tunnel system means that excavation here carries infiltration risk that has to be addressed before it is encountered. Structural assessment of the ground at the identified depth is required before drilling or excavation can proceed safely. The expertise needed for both of those tasks is specialized. It takes time to bring in and deploy correctly. And the island's history of defeating investigations that move too quickly toward a result is a lesson the team has learned across enough seasons to apply here. The identification has been made. The confirmation will not happen quickly, but it will happen from a position of more specific knowledge than any prior phase of this investigation has possessed. The historical record of Oak Island investigation, read against Marty's identification, produces alignments that were not previously as visible as they are now. Prior investigators working in and around the zone Marty identified produced accounts, in journals and correspondence and newspaper reports, of anomalies they could not explain with the equipment and understanding available to them. Unusual resistance in specific ground, readings that did not match the surrounding area, references to features that were documented as significant without being understood as significant in the right way. Those accounts were not wrong. They were descriptions of a location that was producing signals. Signals the investigators of the time had no framework for interpreting. The framework the current investigation has developed, across 13 seasons of methodical data collection, is what has finally made those signals readable. And they are reading in the direction of the same location Marty pointed to. What confirming this location would mean beyond Oak Island is a question that the investigation's history makes worth asking. The physical evidence accumulated across this investigation has always implied questions that extend past the island's geography, about who built the underground system, when, and what they were protecting that justified this level of engineering effort. A confirmed location for the system's primary protected zone would not answer those questions, but it would give the investigation a physical reference point from which to address them. A specific, confirmed, physical location that the historical and archaeological research can then be organized around. That is a different kind of research from the current kind, which has always been tracking something whose position could be estimated but not confirmed. Confirmed position changes everything about how the evidence around it can be interpreted. The next steps are clear in their broad outline. Extended radar mapping of the identified zone, at higher resolution than prior passes have achieved, will refine the picture of what exists at depth. Core drilling at specific points within the zone will provide material evidence of the underground conditions, what the structural features look like up